People always ask me if I believe in second chances. Well, let me tell you a story about getting one when you least expect it. My name is Jenny, and I died at 28. Not the most glamorous way to start a conversation, I know, but stick with me. See, I spent my entire life being the invisible daughter, the one who existed solely to make her golden boy brother Derek shine brighter. It started when we were kids. Derek was 2 years younger, born with this angelic face and natural charm that made everyone fall in love with him instantly. Me? I was the reliable one, the one who cleaned up his messes, covered for his lies, and somehow always ended up taking the blame when things went wrong. When Derek was 16, he got diagnosed with leukemia. I'll never forget that day. Mum collapsed in the hospital hallway. Dad held Derek's hand while tears streamed down his face, and I stood there, wondering if anyone would even notice if I disappeared. But here's the thing about being the invisible child. You become incredibly good at making sacrifices no one sees. I gave up my full scholarship to Oxford University so my parents could use that money for Derek's experimental treatments. When insurance wouldn't cover everything, I dropped out of community college and worked 3 jobs. Morning shifts at a diner, afternoons at a bookstore, and nights cleaning offices. Derek needed a bone marrow transplant. Guess who was a perfect match? The same invisible daughter who'd been quietly taking care of everyone else her whole life. Jenny's our miracle, Dad said after the surgery. For exactly 5 minutes, I felt like I mattered. Derek recovered beautifully. 6 months later, he was back to his old self, charming, ambitious, and completely convinced the world owed him everything. My parents celebrated by throwing him a new life party and buying him a brand new car. Me? I got a pat on the shoulder and a "thank you, honey," before they moved on to planning Derek's future. College came around again. Derek wanted to study business at an expensive private university. It's an investment in his future, Mum explained when I suggested maybe I could finally use that scholarship money I'd saved. Derek has such potential. You understand, right, Jenny? You've always been so good at understanding. I understood, all right. I understood that I was 26 years old, still working those same 3 jobs, still living at home to help with expenses, still watching my little brother live the life I'd given up for him. Then, Derek graduated and decided he wanted to start his own tech company. Did he have any experience? No. Did he have a solid business plan? Barely. Did my parents mortgage their house to give him startup money? Absolutely. This is Derek's moment to shine, Dad told me when I suggested maybe they should keep some savings for emergencies. You've always been practical, Jenny. Derek's the visionary. The company failed within 8 months. Derek blamed the market, the investors, everyone but himself. My parents blamed bad luck. I blamed myself for not saying something sooner. By then, I was getting sick. Little things at first. Fatigue, bruising easily, catching every cold that went around. I figured it was stress from working so much. When I finally collapsed at work and ended up in the emergency room, the doctors ran test after test. Rare or autoimmune blood disorder. Genetic, they said. Treatable, but expensive. And it would only get worse with time. I remember sitting in that sterile hospital room, holding the diagnosis papers, thinking about how to tell my parents. Would they mortgage what was left of their house for my treatment like they did for Derek's business? Would they sell Dad's vintage car collection or Mum's jewellery? I never got the chance to find out. "Jenny, sweetie, we need to talk," Mum said when I got home from the hospital. She and Dad were sitting at the kitchen table with Derek, all of them looking serious. "Derek's been offered an amazing opportunity," Dad began. "There's an investor willing to fund his new app idea, but they want him to move to Silicon Valley immediately." "That's wonderful," I said, genuinely happy for him despite everything. When do you leave?" "Well, that's the thing," Derek said, not quite meeting my eyes. I need help with the security deposit and first few months' rent. California's expensive. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. How much help? We've been talking, Mum said carefully, and we think it would be best if you moved out, found your own place. You're 28 now, and it's time for you to be independent. Independent. Right. After spending 8 years being anything but independent, so I could support their dreams for Derek. With my medical bills starting, I began. You're strong, Jenny. You always figure things out, Dad interrupted. Derek needs this chance. You understand? I understood perfectly. My little brother needed their financial support for his dreams, and my medical expenses would get in the way of that. So, once again, Jenny would sacrifice herself for Derek's success. I moved out that week, found a tiny studio apartment that took most of my income, started rationing my medications because I couldn't afford both rent and proper treatment, watched my health decline while my family celebrated Derek's new adventure through social media posts I wasn't included in. The irony is I never resented Derek himself. He was just doing what he'd always done, taking what was offered and assuming he deserved it. The resentment was for my parents, who made those offers, who looked at their 2 children and consistently chose one over the other. 3 months after Derek moved to California, my condition worsened dramatically. I ended up hospitalized for 2 weeks. Did my parents visit? Did they call? Derek sent a text. Sorry you're sick. Things are crazy busy here. Mum says you understand. I understood, all right. I understood that I was dying and I was dying alone. That's when something shifted inside me. Maybe it was the morphine, or maybe it was finally accepting the truth I'd been avoiding my whole life. But lying there in that hospital bed, watching other patients get visits from families who actually cared, I made a decision. If I somehow survived this, things were going to change. I didn't survive, but sometimes the universe has other plans. The first thing I noticed when I opened my eyes wasn't the sunlight streaming through familiar curtains, or the pink wallpaper I'd begged Mum to let me change when I turned 16. It was the date on my old digital alarm clock. September the 15th, 2010. I was 18 again. Now, I know what you're thinking. This sounds like some fantasy novel nonsense, right? Trust me, I thought the same thing. I spent the first hour pinching myself, checking mirrors, even calling the local newspaper to confirm the date. But there I was, back in my childhood bedroom, with Derek's muffled voice drifting through the wall as he talked to his friends about some girl he was trying to impress. The memories of my previous life were crystal clear. Every disappointment, every sacrifice, every moment of being overlooked. It was all there, preserved like photographs in my mind. But now, I had something I'd never had before. Knowledge of what was coming. I knew Derek would get sick in 6 years. I knew my parents would sacrifice everything for him. I knew about my own genetic condition that wouldn't manifest symptoms until my mid-20s. Most importantly, I knew I didn't have to let history repeat itself. Jenny, breakfast! Mum's voice called from downstairs, just like it had 10 years ago. When I walked into the kitchen, the scene was exactly as I remembered. Dad reading his financial newspaper, Mum flipping pancakes, Derek scrolling through his phone with that cocky 16-year-old smirk. The same dynamic, the same energy, the same invisible treatment of their eldest daughter. Morning, sweetheart, Mum said without looking up. Can you drive Derek to soccer practice after school? Dad and I have that parent-teacher conference for his chemistry grade. In my original life, I'd said yes immediately. This time, I poured myself coffee and sat down calmly. Actually, I can't today. I have something important to take care of. Derek looked up from his phone, surprised. What could you possibly have that's more important than my practice? College applications, I said simply. The Oxford scholarship deadline is next month. The kitchen went quiet. In my previous timeline, I'd never even mentioned Oxford to my family. I'd applied secretly and won the scholarship, then gave it up before they even knew it existed. Oxford? Dad folded his newspaper. Honey, that's in England. It's very expensive. Full scholarship, I replied. Room, board, tuition, everything covered. Mum turned around, spatula in hand. But Jenny, you know we'll need help with Derek's college costs in a couple years. There it was, the assumption that my future existed solely to support Derek's. This time, I was ready for it. Derek's smart. I'm sure he'll earn his own scholarships. Derek scoffed. Right, because you're so much smarter than me. I never said that. I kept my voice level. I said you'll earn your own scholarships. You've got 2 years to bring your grades up. The truth was, Derek was intelligent. He just never had to try because he always knew someone else would handle the difficult stuff for him. Maybe a little pressure would do him good. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into applications and preparations with laser focus. Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, MIT. I applied everywhere I knew I could get in. But more importantly, I started making moves that would secure my financial future. See, dying once gives you a unique perspective on risk. I remembered certain stocks that would skyrocket, companies that would emerge from nowhere to dominate their markets, real estate areas that would become gold mines. I had 10 years' worth of winning lottery numbers memorized, but I was smarter than that. Lottery winners attract attention and suspicion. Instead, I took the $3,000 I'd saved from my part-time job at the local bookstore and made some very strategic investments. Bitcoin was still a curiosity in 2010, trading for pennies. I bought as much as I could afford, then set up a systematic investment plan for every paycheck. I also remembered a small tech startup called Instagram that 2 guys named Kevin and Mike were about to launch. They'd be looking for early investors soon. Then there was Tesla, still struggling but about to revolutionize everything. Netflix was about to shift their entire business model to streaming. The beautiful thing about being 18 again with an adult's knowledge is that no one questions your decisions because they assume you don't know enough to make truly consequential ones. Jenny's going through some phase, I heard Mum tell Dad one evening. All this talk about investments and college abroad, she'll settle down. Derek was less dismissive and more annoyed. He'd grown used to having his personal chauffeur and homework help available whenever he needed her. Now I was busy with my own projects, and he actually had to figure things out himself. What's your problem lately? He cornered me after school one day. You're being weird. I'm being focused, I corrected. There's a difference? Focused on what? Acting like you're better than everyone? I studied my 16-year-old brother, remembering the man he'd become. Entitled, dependent, unable to handle failure because he'd never had to face consequences. Maybe I could change that too. Derek, can I ask you something? What do you want to do with your life? He shrugged. I don't know. Something cool. Maybe start a company or whatever. What kind of company? I don't know. A successful one. That was Derek in a nutshell. He wanted the results without understanding the process. In my original timeline, my parents' unconditional support had enabled this thinking. But what if things were different? You know what's cool? I said. Actually, knowing how to build something, understanding how businesses work, learning skills that make you valuable. Whatever, Jenny. Not everyone needs to be a nerd about everything. But I noticed him researching business programs online later that week. Meanwhile, my Oxford application moved forward smoothly. The interview was conducted via video call, and having lived through graduate-level coursework in my previous life, I handled their questions with confidence that impressed even me. The acceptance letter arrived in February 2011. Full scholarship, just as I remembered. This time, though, I wasn't giving it up. England is so far away, Mum said when I showed them the letter. Are you sure about this? Very sure. What about helping Derek with college applications next year? Dad asked. Derek's capable of handling his own applications. He might even do better when he has to rely on himself. I saw Derek flinch at that. Good. Maybe it would motivate him. What my family didn't know was that my investment portfolio had grown to over $50,000 by then. Bitcoin had started its first major climb, and my Tesla and Netflix positions were showing serious gains. I'd also connected with Kevin Systrom through a mutual friend from my previous life's network and made a small but significant early investment in Instagram. The night before I left for England, Derek knocked on my bedroom door. I got accepted to State University, he said quietly, with a partial academic scholarship. I looked up from my packing, genuinely surprised. Derek, that's amazing. What changed? He shifted uncomfortably. I guess I figured if you could get into Oxford, I could at least get into State. And maybe I should learn to do things myself. For the first time in either timeline, I felt proud of my little brother. You're going to do great, I told him. And I meant it. As my plane lifted off for London the next morning, I looked down at the city where I'd sacrificed everything and gained nothing. This time would be different. This time, Jenny Wilson was going to build an empire. Oxford was everything I remembered and more. The difference was, this time I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. While my classmates struggled with the transition from high school to university-level thinking, I had the advantage of already knowing how to navigate complex academic challenges. But university was just my cover story. My real education was happening in the financial markets. By December 2011, my investment portfolio had crossed the $200,000 mark. Instagram had launched and was gaining traction exactly as I remembered. My early investment gave me a small but significant stake in what would soon become a billion-dollar company. Bitcoin continued its volatile but ultimately upward climb, and I'd started diversifying into emerging markets and renewable energy stocks. The key was patience and appearing normal. I couldn't suddenly become a millionaire teenager without raising questions, so I played the part of a lucky amateur investor who'd made a few smart guesses. Jenny's always been good with numbers, Mum told her bridge club when they asked about my investment hobby. I heard about it through Derek, who called me monthly, a huge improvement from our previous relationship. She's actually helping me understand my business courses, he admitted during one of our conversations. Who knew my nerdy sister could explain market dynamics better than my professors? Derek was changing, slowly but surely. Without me constantly enabling his laziness, he'd been forced to develop actual skills. His grades improved, he joined the business club, and he even started a small side hustle selling custom phone cases. Nothing revolutionary, but it showed initiative I'd never seen in my previous timeline. Meanwhile, I was building connections that would matter. Oxford's network was incredible. Future politicians, business leaders, innovators. I made sure to befriend people whose paths I remembered, while also cultivating relationships with promising individuals I'd overlooked before. One person who caught my attention was Rebecca Martinez, a brilliant economics student from Spain. In my previous life, she'd gone on to found a fintech company that revolutionized European banking. This time, I made sure we became study partners and close friends. Your insights on market psychology are fascinating, she told me after one of our study sessions. Have you considered going into investment banking after graduation? I'm thinking more along the lines of starting my own firm, I said casually. She laughed. Ambitious? I like it. What Rebecca didn't know was that I was already laying the groundwork for exactly that. By sophomore year, my net worth had quietly climbed past the $1 million mark. Bitcoin's first major surge had multiplied my holdings. Instagram was showing explosive growth, and Tesla stock was finally starting to reflect the company's potential. I'd also made strategic investments in several startups that I knew would either be acquired by major corporations or go public successfully. The challenging part wasn't making money. It was managing my family's expectations and maintaining my cover. "How's school going, honey?" Dad asked during one of our monthly video calls. "Not too expensive, I hope?" "The scholarship covers everything, remember? I'm actually doing fine financially. My investment project for economics class is performing well." "Investment project?" Mum leaned into the frame. "That sounds complicated." "Just learning about the stock market. Nothing major." If only they knew their nothing major daughter now owned more assets than their entire household. Derek's calls had become more frequent and more genuine. Without my constant interference, he developed his own relationship with our parents, and apparently it wasn't entirely sunshine and roses. "They keep comparing everything I do to what they imagine you're doing at Oxford," he complained during one call. "Mum actually said maybe I should be more like you and focus on my studies instead of my social life." "How does it feel being the disappointing child for once?" I asked, only half joking. "Honestly, it sucks. I never realised how much pressure you were under." That conversation marked a turning point in our relationship. Derek was growing up, developing empathy, and learning to see beyond his own immediate wants. Maybe this timeline would give us the chance to actually be siblings, instead of rivals for parental attention. Junior year brought new opportunities and challenges. My investment portfolio had grown substantial enough that I needed professional management, but I couldn't reveal the full extent of my wealth without triggering investigations. Instead, I set up a complex structure of trusts and shell companies, using my Oxford connections to navigate international finance laws. I also started my first real business venture, a consulting firm that helped small European companies expand into emerging markets. It was perfect cover for my growing wealth, and it allowed me to leverage my knowledge of which markets would boom over the next decade. Wilson Consulting is making quite a name for itself, Professor Thompson mentioned after one of our international business seminars. "Your insights on Southeast Asian markets have been remarkably prescient." "Lucky guesses," I said modestly while internally celebrating another successful prediction. By this point, Derek had graduated and was working at a mid-tier consulting firm in Chicago. He'd turned down several offers to pursue his old dream of immediate entrepreneurship, choosing instead to learn the business world from the ground up. "I want to understand how things actually work before I try to change them," he explained during one of our calls. "Crazy concept, right?" "Revolutionary," I agreed. "How are Mum and Dad handling their reformed son?" "They're proud, I think. Confused, but proud. They keep asking if you influenced me somehow." "Did I?" "Yeah, but not the way they think. Watching you just leave and succeed without them made me realise I didn't want to spend my whole life being dependent on other people's support." As senior year approached, I faced a decision point. My wealth had grown to over $15 million through a combination of strategic investments and successful business ventures. I could have revealed everything then, could have returned home as the conquering hero. But I remembered the real goal, not just success, but teaching my family the value of the daughter they'd taken for granted. Instead, I made a different choice. "I'm staying in London after graduation," I announced during our family video call. "I've been accepted to several PhD programs, and my consulting business is really taking off here." The silence stretched uncomfortably long. "But Jenny," Mum finally said, "we thought you'd come home. We've missed you." "Have you?" I asked quietly, because I seemed to remember you being pretty eager for me to become independent. Dad cleared his throat. "That was different, honey. You were younger then." "I was 28, Dad. Hardly a child." More silence. Derek, who was also on the call, looked uncomfortable. "Things are different now," he said finally. "The family is different." "How so?" "We talk about you all the time," Mum said quickly. "We're so proud of what you've accomplished." You're proud of the idea of what I've accomplished, I corrected. But you don't actually know what that is, do you? They didn't respond because they couldn't. They'd spent 4 years assuming I was just playing at being successful, never bothering to ask for details or show genuine interest in my life. I'll visit for Christmas, I said finally. But London is my home now. After the call ended, I sat in my upscale London apartment looking out at the Thames. My phone showed my latest portfolio update, $18.2 million and growing. In 2 years, when Forbes published their first 30 under 30 inches list, for Europe, my name would appear in the finance category. That's when everything would change. But for now, I was content to let them wonder what exactly their invisible daughter had become. 2 years later, everything changed in the span of 48 hours. It was March 15th, 2016, when Forbes published their European auction, 30 under 30 inches list. I'd been expecting it, but seeing my name in print still sent a thrill through me. Jennifer Wilson, 24, founder and CEO of Wilson Global Ventures, net worth $47 million. The article detailed my meteoric rise from Oxford student to successful venture capitalist, highlighting my early investments in companies that had since become household names. What it didn't mention was that my actual net worth had quietly climbed past $80 million, thanks to strategic cryptocurrency investments and a particularly lucrative exit from a German renewable energy startup. I was in my London office reviewing acquisition proposals when my assistant knocked on the door. "Miss Wilson, you have 17 missed calls from various numbers in the United States, all from Illinois." I didn't need to check to know who they were from. The first voicemail was Mom, her voice shaking with excitement. "Jenny, oh my God, Jenny! We just saw the Forbes article. Why didn't you tell us? Call us immediately." The second was Dad. "Sweetheart, we had no idea you were doing so well. We're so proud. We need to talk." The third was Derek, and his tone was different. "Jen, I just saw the news. Holy shit. I mean, I knew you were successful, but 47 million. Call me when you can. And congratulations." 17 more voicemails followed, each one more desperate than the last. By the final message, Mum was practically begging. "Please call us back, Jenny. We're your family. We should be celebrating together." I deleted them all without listening to the rest. Instead, I called Rebecca, who was now running her fintech startup in Barcelona. "I saw the Forbes article," she said immediately. "Congratulations, though I have to ask, why did you lowball your net worth by about 40 million? "Privacy," I said simply, and I wasn't ready for the attention. "Well, you're going to get it now. My phone's been ringing all morning with reporters wanting quotes about the mysterious British venture capitalist who predicted the tech boom." She was right. Within hours, interview requests flooded in from financial news outlets across Europe and America. Business schools wanted me as a guest lecturer. Investment firms offered me partnerships worth more than my parents had earned in their entire careers combined. But the call I was waiting for came that evening. "Jenny," Derek's voice was subdued, "can we talk? Privately?" "I'm listening." "I told Mum and Dad to back off for now. They're freaking out, but I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "Go ahead." "How long have you been this successful?" I was quiet for a moment. "Define successful." "Come on, Jen. Forbes doesn't just notice you overnight. You've been building this for years, haven't you?" "Since Oxford." "So when we were having those conversations about me learning to be independent, about understanding how businesses work, you were already worth millions?" "Yes." Another long pause. "Why didn't you tell us?" "Derek, think about it. Really think. When in our family history has anyone ever asked me about my actual achievements versus what they assumed I was doing?" "That's not..." He stopped. Fuck, that's exactly right, isn't it? For 4 years, Mum and Dad assumed I was just playing around with some college investment project. Not once did they ask for details or show genuine interest in what I was building. And you let them think that. I let them reveal who they really are, just like I'm letting them reveal it now. The next morning brought a new wave of contact attempts. This time, my parents had upgraded to overnight express letters, flowers delivered to my office, and increasingly frantic messages through Derek. The final straw came when Mum showed up at my London office unannounced. "Ma'am, you can't go up without an appointment," I heard my security guard saying through the intercom. "I'm her mother. Jennifer Wilson is my daughter." I sighed and told security to send her up. Mum burst into my office looking like she hadn't slept in days. She was dressed in her best outfit, the one she usually saved for church or Derek's important events. "Jenny, sweetheart!" She rushed toward me for a hug that I sidestepped smoothly. "Hello, Mum. This is unexpected." "I had to come. I couldn't reach you, and this is also incredible. My daughter on the Forbes list." She looked around my office, taking in the view of the Thames, the expensive furniture, the original artwork. "I had no idea you were doing so well." "No, you didn't." Something in my tone made her pause. "Honey, are you upset about something?" "Where's Dad?" "He wanted to come, but someone had to stay with the house. We're having some financial difficulties, actually, and—" "What kind of difficulties?" She sat down heavily. "Well, Derek's been doing well at his job, but he moved out and got his own place. And your father's company had some layoffs last year. Our savings are pretty much gone, and we might lose the house." There it was, the real reason for the sudden interest in my success. "How much do you need?" Her face brightened immediately. "Oh, Jenny, you would help us. I knew you would. You were always such a good daughter. We need about $200,000 to pay off the mortgage and get back on our feet." $200,000? I know it sounds like a lot, but for someone with your resources— "Mum," I kept my voice level. "Do you remember what you said to me 8 years ago when I was diagnosed with that blood disorder?" Her face went blank. "What blood disorder?" "In my original timeline, when I was 28 and sick and Derek needed money to move to California." "Jenny, what are you talking about? Original timeline?" I realized she couldn't remember something that had never happened in this reality. But the character that made those choices, that was still there. "Let me ask you something simpler. If Derek had been the one to appear on that Forbes list, what would you have done?" "Well, I'd be proud of both my children. Mum, be honest." She was quiet for a long moment. "I suppose I'd probably call him first. He's always been more open with us about his life. And if you needed money, who would you ask?" "Well, Derek, because we're closer." She stopped, finally hearing herself. "There it is. Jenny, that's not fair. Derek has always been more communicative." "Derek has always been more favoured. There's a difference." I walked to my window, looking out at the city I'd conquered while my family assumed I was just playing student. "I'm going to help you," I said finally. "Oh, thank God! But not the way you expect." I turned back to face her. "I'm going to pay off your mortgage. I'm going to set up a trust fund that ensures you never have to worry about money again. But there are conditions." "Anything." "First, you don't get to ask me for money ever again. This is it. One time, and then you live within the means I provide." She nodded eagerly. "Second, you're going to write letters. To both Derek and me. Apologising for the favouritism, acknowledging the ways you failed as parents, and committing to change." Her face fell. "Jenny, we love both of you equally." "Mom, I have recordings of family conversations going back years. I have documentation of every time you chose Derek over me, every sacrifice I made that went unnoticed, every moment you made it clear I was the backup child. Don't insult my intelligence." She was quiet for a long time. What if we can't change? What if we've been this way too long? Then you'll be comfortable failures instead of broke ones. But Derek has changed. You can too. 6 months later, I received 2 letters. Dad's was stilted and formal, clearly written because I demanded it. But Mom's was different. 3 pages of genuine reflection, painful honesty, and what seemed like authentic remorse. Derek called me after receiving his letter. Did you really threaten to cut them off financially if they didn't apologise to us? I didn't threaten. I stated a condition. You know they're telling everyone in town that their daughter is a millionaire now, right? Let them, as long as they remember why they almost lost her. Jen, yeah, I'm proud of you, not just for the money or the success, for making them face what they did. Thanks, Derek. Also, I have a business proposal for you when you're ready to hear it. I smiled. I'm listening. Some second chances are about getting what you always wanted. Others are about teaching people the value of what they took for granted. Mine was both, and that Forbes list, it was just the beginning.